Space, a dark and cold place where millions of stars decorate the atmosphere. You know, comets, shooting stars, planets, black holes. It's amazing, really. It's so huge that you'll never find out the full extent of its majesty with its seemingly non-stop existence. I mean, just imagine yourself floating in space, taking in the enormity of it all, drifting past those beautiful Milky Ways, planets in the distance, and the hazy weightlessness of it all, and then aliens. Yeah, you know, those scary big bastards. Now, not all aliens are scary. I mean, who remembers Alf? But these ones, they are indeed scary, and if you've seen the film, you probably have an idea of what you're going to get yourself into with this game. Yes, that's right. Today we're going to talk about Aliens the computer game, which was released in the UK. And Aliens the computer game is a 1986 video game based on James Cameron's Aliens that was developed by Software Studios, that's the development division of Electric Dreams, and it was published by Electric Dreams, which was also a subsidiary of Activision. It was released for the Amstrad CPC, the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. Then there was also ports for the Commodore 16 and the MSX, which were developed by Mr. Micro and published in 1987. Now, this game is not to be confused with Activision's own Aliens the computer game, which was released around the same time. Basically, Activision released their own version in America, and Electric Dreams released theirs in Europe. And unsurprisingly, the one in the US was called Aliens, the computer game, the US version. Anyway, we're only going to focus on the EU version here. Perhaps I'll cover the US version at a later date. Anyway, the EU version's a much better version, with much better reviews. Now, in this video, we're going to look at all the format versions of Aliens the computer game, the EU version. I am assuming that the Commodore 64 version is the original, so we're going to start by looking at that version first. So, let's get started. So, what's the plot of this game? Well, you basically take control of Space Marines, investigating strange goings-on at the planet LV-426, amongst the human colony currently situated there. And apparently the people have stopped checking in, and the authorities are worried, so you have been given the task of seeing what's going on. Great, thanks for that. I'm sure they thought, probably a loose phone cable or something. Nothing to worry about. Oh dear. Anyway, Electric Dreams Aliens is a fairly straightforward first-person shooter inside an atmospheric processing plant, a maze complex consisting of 255 rooms taken over by those scary bastard aliens. And our mission is to take our team of space exterminators through the endless corridors of the facility, kill all the aliens and somehow destroy the alien queen and her nest. And, of course, save Newt while you're at it. Couldn't be much simpler on paper, could it? Now, it is important to point out that these sorts of first-person games were not very often done back then, and certainly not in a particularly interesting manner, because the hardware of the time wouldn't allow for much more in terms of graphics. So, the trick was to restrict the movement, to just going sideways through the corridors and shoot at things with your crosshair, then walk through doorways by a separate key meant for the job. Orientating yourself to the way how the corridors work can be difficult, but you are provided with a map. As for the team, well, you have to control each member separately, but each of them has their own stamina and energy that you have to keep an eye on, as well as any signs that your team members are under attack or something. For me, it's a surprisingly good amount of work for a game of this age. Now, I cannot honestly say that this is a particularly easy game to get into, because it's not. It takes time and practice to get used to it, but once you get into the rhythm and logic of it, it can be a very rewarding experience and one you can easily return to on a regular basis. As such, I recommend this title, but it's also very much worth taking a look for its historical reasons. The game series is now 40 years old, which makes it one of the most enduring game franchises. Compared to the way the game looks from start to finish, Aliens is surprisingly complex. First, you will notice that you will play as a team, as there are 6 slots in the info display section of the screen showing each member of the team, their health status and their location. Contrary to modern team-played games, you have no choice but to control one person at a time until you decide to change to another member of your team. You can select each member by their initials on the keyboard, R for Ripley, G for Gorman, H for Hicks and V for Vasquez. But since there are 2 characters whose name starts with the letter B, Burke has been chosen to occupy the letter and Bishop is selected by the letter I. And according to the game manual, you, the unarmed player behind the keyboard or joystick, command the crew members around the base from a mobile tactical operations bay they've just set up outside the colony base. And you remain there and direct the other crew members. So basically, you're the wimp that gets killed last. So, of course, this explains the way the game looks. You've got a video screen showing each member's view from their helmet cameras, just like the film, and the crosshair to indicate each team member's movement and aim, and all sorts of personal information on each team member below the video screen. And each character has their own unique strengths and weaknesses. And in the middle, you have the selected crew member's portrait, left of which is the member's biofunctions trace, and to the right you can see the current member's ammunition levels. In the smaller slots around the middle one, you can see each member's occupied room number and a bio-monitor bar which shows the member's life status. And that's where green is healthy, yellow's been impregnated by an alien and red has been impregnated and cannot be saved. Also in the slots you'll have stamina, and basically any movement will reduce the bar size and resting will restore it. There's also a score counter under the crew member portrait as well, but that's the least of your worries. And as I've already mentioned, the primary goal is to get to the Queen's Chamber, room 248, and dispose of the alien scum. Unfortunately, unless you have an exceptionally good visual memory, you will need to have the map, which is provided with the original game. There are 255 rooms in this game, and the base is constructed in a unique manner, so you cannot really do without a map. More to the point, since you can actually direct the crew members to move through up to 9 rooms at a time to any single direction, you will need to know where to go. You just have to perform it in a certain order. First, have your character selected, then press a number key to move the chosen amount of rooms, and then press the direction, north, south, east, west. And finally, switch to another character to make the previous move on their own. When you feel like you have no choice but to move around manually, you can use the crosshair to move around and shoot, and pass through doors by pressing the space bar. You will also notice rather early on in the game that you have to clear up some of the biomechanical alien growth in the walls by shooting at it in order to find hidden doors, and also in order to minimise the possibility of getting more aliens spawned in the rooms that this stuff is found in. You may also seal doors by blasting the lock mechanisms next to the door. Of course, then if you need to go through a sealed door, you need to blast it to smithereens. It's also quite important to point out that queen aliens or groups of warrior aliens can break through sealed doors. Oh, that's not good. What's the point of blasting the doors shut then, huh? Now, the Commodore 64 version of this game does have a crucial bug, which has ruined the game a few times. For example, if your stamina level goes to 0 when you walk through a doorway, the game freezes. Now, there might be an unbugged version of the Commodore 64 Aliens the computer game. Otherwise, the only reason I would actually recommend that you buy this game would be purely to build up your retro gaming collection. Anyway, back to the game. Now, thankfully the Marines are equipped with a variety of weapons, including pulse rifles, flamethrowers and grenades. And they will certainly need to use these weapons to clear out these aliens and destroy the alien eggs and contain biomechanical growth. And as you will soon enough notice after you start the game, you will come across some of these alien drones quite often. And the deeper you get into the base, the more aliens you'll meet, and they get gradually more hostile as well. And those aliens, well, they're probably complex and they are attracted to gunfire. Again, just like the movie. And they will home in on nearby characters and attack, requiring the player to aim the character's gun to defend themselves against the Russian aliens. This should be kept firmly in mind, since you will need all the bullets you can get. If an alien attacks a character that we're not controlling, they will capture the character, and this is indicated by a yellow status light. Therefore, you must guide another character to the position of the hostage and kill the guardian alien to rescue them. If not, the captured character will be lost. Happily, the game will always notify you when there's an alien in the room one of your team members occupy, by making a gradually intensifying noise and showing the endangered person's name in a different colour. Basically, once you have an alien drone in your vision, you only need 1 bullet in the head to kill an alien, or 3 bullets elsewhere in the body, although you might need another one to attract it to come towards you so that you can actually kill it. You should also keep in mind not to shoot an alien in front of a doorway, because it will automatically squirt some acid on the spot, which will drain your energy if you have to walk through it. Sooner or later, you will also come across facehuggers and alien warriors, and finally the alien queen. So, you will need to be either extremely quick in your moves with a single character, or have all your team in the move all the time, because the only place where you can get some more bullets is the armory, which is room 28, which is located the closest to the entrance room of all the important rooms. Similarly, a medical bay can replenish any damage. And also I mentioned earlier that characters have a limited stamina used up with every move made. When your stamina is low, well, the player must find a safe spot for the character to rest up. The complex also houses a generator controlling the lights, which the aliens can destroy or the marines can then repair. So, quite a bit to take in there, isn't there? And also, like in the movie, Newt is the only survivor you'll come across in the otherwise alien-infested LV-426 colony. She tends to pop up in random places and she serves no real purpose other than giving you an additional scare. And you know, there's also a weird moral choice of shooting her for bonus points. Yes, bonus points for killing a little girl. What were they thinking? Or, preferably, you can just let her run away, which will also give you bonus points. Not particularly interesting here, but in the heat of the action, Newt can certainly surprise you a bit, since her appearance is very uncommon. And finally, the ultimate goal of the game is to reach the room that houses the queen alien and her nests. Now that flipping queen, she is a formidable enemy and players must use all their skills and resources to defeat her. And the game is completed only when you've destroyed everything in the room occupied by the queen alien and have returned to room 1 with the remaining marines. So, there you go, that was the Commodore 64 version of Alien the computer game. Right, here we go. We are now onto the ZX Spectrum version of Aliens. Now, for all its intense gameplay and atmosphere, the game doesn't have all that much of graphics across all the format versions. Well, at least not on a large scale. In a cinema-like manner, the game starts with a credit screen and the title card revealed. Apart from that, the graphics are much the same. So, instead, let's talk about the sound. Although the Spectrum version, even in 128K mode, utilises only the single channel beeper, it has been given a title theme tune. Okay, it doesn't really resemble much of anything in the movie's soundtrack. It's more like a mock horror movie theme in a similar vein to what the movie Beetlejuice has. But nevertheless, it is a tune, and if you don't think about it too much, it gives a fairly nice atmosphere to start the game by. The sound effects, however, are a bit lacking, since you don't get a warning signal for when another one of your team members is in trouble. You just have to notice that yellow highlight on the said person's name. Although the shooting noise is very good, I would say even better than the Commodore 64 version. And the alien in the same room signal works well enough, even though it doesn't grow in intensity. It raises the pitch a few times though. Now, I have to say the Spectre controls are a little bit awkward, since you can only use the cursor keys to control the smart gun, unless of course you can replace the cursor keys with a joystick. Those of you familiar with the Spectrum keyboard, you might be a bit shocked to learn that they are placed with numeric keys, 5 to 8, 5 being left, 6 being down, 7 being up and 8 being right, and then there's 0 which is used for the fire button. Added to that, you will need to use the keys for each member, along with all the numbers and compass directions, north, south, east, west, for instructing the members to move without your manual labour. So, you will have your fingers quite well at work in the Spectrum version. You should be able to change the controls in the startup screen, but I could never tell what happens in the controls when you change them, and the Spectrum version's instruction manual doesn't tell it to you either. But that's only the beginning of my account of the differences here. Your crew members move a bit slower on command than they do on the Commodore 64. The cursor moves around with a slow inertia, as well as being a bit jerky. And the game scrolls up to a few character blocks width at a time, depending on your crosshair's speed of movement. Also, the aliens move at a higher speed, so it's much more difficult to get a good aim at them. And also, the alien growth in the walls is wider, so you don't need to shoot at it much, but with the slow crosshair, it takes some practice and patience to get yourself adjusted to this version. But I suppose the biggest advantage of the Spectrum version that it has over the Commodore 64 one is that it doesn't have nearly as many bugs in the official release, and I have encountered no freezing problems whatsoever, so that's a good thing. With regards to the actual reception to the game, well, Crash gave it a score of 84%, with one reviewer declaring it the best game of the film to date. And also, your Sinclair, it gave it 9 out of 10. Very good. Overall, Aliens is a very good game on the Speccy. It's certainly worth playing. The graphics are very neat with the aliens suitably represented. But bearing in mind the fact that the film is classed as being a horror, I think it could have been a bit more atmospheric, a somewhat difficult proposition on the Spectrum, I have to say. The title tune is fair, and overall Aliens is a very playable name. I have no complaints. Right, okay, now we're on to the Amstrad CPC version of Aliens. Now, the Amstrad version has the same theme tune as the Spectrum version, but it does take advantage of the AY sound chip and gives a more pronounced beat for the tune, as well as some nice harmonics. But as I said, the composition doesn't go all that well together with a game based on a movie that has a less beat orientated and more atmospheric soundtrack. Still, more is more when you feel like it. And when you want more, you do get some more. There is a strange ambient sort of soundtrack in the background when you play, and it includes some random bits of melody and other noises, as if to create more of an atmosphere around the bass. Somehow the Amstrad version manages to pull it off, even though I still prefer the haunting silence of the previous versions over this. However, for some reason, they didn't quite get the other sounds as they should be. For example, when there's an alien in the same room, the alarm doesn't change at all before all that scary stuff happens. And the shooting noise sounds more like a comedy shot, as if your character was throwing darts in a slapstick film. Unlike the Spectrum version, this one doesn't feature a fainter alarm sound for when another team member is endangered. And with regards to the playability, well, the Amstrad version suffers from a similar scrolling problem as the Spectrum version, as well as the cursor slowness and jerkiness, not to mention the relative slowness of crew members moving on command. But at least the aliens walk around in a more sedate manner. Also, there are no control related problems on the Amstrad, since it has separate cursor arrows on the keyboard, and you can also use a joystick here. So, for me, somehow, this version falls kind of halfway between the Spectrum and Commodore 64 versions, but unfortunately, it's more like a mixed bag of good and bad, rather than the optimal version. Okay, here we go. This is the MSX version of Aliens. Now, the MSX version is basically a straight port of the Spectrum version, as far as graphics and sounds go, so there's no really any need to write more about it here. But with regards to the playability, surprisingly, there is less control jerkiness and slightly better scrolling on the MSX, but only slightly, although the crosshair is still a bit on the slow side, but that's not too bad considering everything. You control your crew with the cursor keys as you would expect, but you shoot with the spacebar and walk through doors with enter. And those pesky aliens, well, they walk around at a similar speed as they do on the Amstrad, and so does your crew on command. So I'd say it's the most playable version based on the Spectrum code. Not bad, let's have a look. Okie dokie, now we're on to the Commodore 16. Firstly, at this point already, I can point out that the Commodore 16 version only features 4 members instead of 6, but considering the hardware, that's plenty enough. Now in regards to the sounds, that is where the Commodore 16 version really shows the disadvantages of the hardware. I mean, there are only 2 sounds in the entire game. One is a repeating short pulse bip sound indicating someone having an alien in the room, whether it's you or one of your team members. And the other sound is the very short and slightly unthreatening gunshot noise. And what can I say about the playability about the C16 version then? Well, all the rooms are supposed to be here, which is quite impressive considering the hardware. Also, the crosshair moves smoothly, which cannot be said of every version, and the scrolling is surprisingly smooth as well, although the screen doesn't scroll at varying speeds. Then again, when it scrolls smoother, it's easier to see things, so it's better this way. It really is. The aliens move around at a similar pace to the Commodore 64 version also, as do your crew members on command, so it's all surprisingly good so far. And as I mentioned before, there are only 4 members in your team, so in theory, it should make this version the easiest one to play, because you don't need to focus on as many people all the time. And the controls, well, they're similar to the MSX version in that you need to use enter to go through the doors and spacebar is used for shooting, but you can also use a joystick as well. Other changes made to the hardware and capabilities are fairly easy to spot, although I'm not sure if these are all the other differences in the game. Sadly, the facehuggers and the eggs are now gone and the corridors are aligned with each other to take less space from memory. Considering everything, it's perhaps the most impressive version of the lot, and it's also perhaps the most instantly playable one. However, and there's always a but, since it lacks some of the original's feel and depth precisely due to these adjustments, it can also be considered the worst version around, which, unfortunately, it must be. Righty-ho, so now I'm going to rank these games, and how would I rank them then? Well, firstly, with regards to the game, the overall game, Aliens the computer game is renowned for its atmospheric and immersive gameplay. The games have that dark, claustrophobic environments, combined with that constant threat of alien attack, creating a palpable sense of tension and dread. The game's graphics are simple but effective, capturing the look and feel of the film. The aliens themselves are particularly well animated also, and their movements are both fluid and terrifying. Aliens the computer game is a masterpiece of retro gaming that perfectly captures the essence of the iconic film. Its atmospheric gameplay, intense action and strategic elements make it a must-play for fans of both the Alien franchise and the video game genre. So with regards to all the versions, Aliens the computer game is a timeless classic that will provide hours of thrilling and terrifying entertainment. And also I have to say, Aliens the computer game received extremely positive reviews upon its release, far better than that Activision version I have to say. So, the Americans didn't quite get the better version, we got it. And according to Retro Gamer, the game was praised by the computing press. Zap, Amstrad Action and Sinclair User awarded it 81%, 90% and 5 out of 5 respectively. But how do I rank these games? So, here I go. So, I thought I would start by talking about the graphics across all the versions. There are 3 rather important things to consider when giving scores for the graphics. There's the detail, the animation and scrolling, although colouring is also important, but it doesn't play as big as a part in this game because there isn't all that much of it to begin with. I mean, too much extra colour could perhaps even hurt the atmosphere. For the most part, the movie is fairly dark and any colour it has is in mostly for the atmosphere. For me, the Commodore 64 original is easily the smoothest version around, although that Commodore 16 version pulls it off rather nicely as well. However, the detail is better on the Spectrum, MSX and C16 versions, although it is clear that the Commodore 16 version has less graphic elements overall. The Amstrad version hits exactly the middle ground between the Commodore 64 and the monochrome versions in that it has the same big pixels as the Commodore 64 version. But it has similarly worse scrolling and less animation frames as the Spectrum and MSX versions have. Since the game requires insane skills and good controls, bigger pixels with better scrolling is infinitely preferable, but when the scrolling and animations are on par, the detail and colouring becomes more important. So, with regards to my vote, I would give the Commodore 64 the best for the graphics, then the MSX, then the ZX Spectrum, then the Amstrad CPC, and then lastly, the Commodore 60. Now, onto the sounds. Now, Electric Dreams Aliens is one of those games that excels in minimalistic sound design. In the supposedly original Commodore 64 version, for example, the game doesn't have any music, but instead, you will only hear a few types of sound effects, which will increase as you make progress. The first sound effect in the game is the blast doors quietly bumping into each other at the very beginning. And with regard to the in-game sound effects, I've noticed that there are three. There's the drone and alarm sound that grows in intensity when an alien occupies the same room as you, and there's a fainter beep sound that fades in and out when one of your other crew members is in danger, and then there's the shooting noise. As the original Alien tagline goes, in space no one can hear you scream, so it's only proper that the sound effects are fairly scarce, particularly as you're supposed to be seeing and hearing everything through a monitor. I mean, all of this depends on whether you're more appreciative of sound effects that are as effective as possible, or music which might not be quite as correct in context as it could be, or perhaps some artificial ambient atmosphere noise. You could easily choose your favourite version simply based on this. But fortunately, it's not as simple as that. Still, I cannot really give my ranking here based entirely on my own preferences, so I shall have to point out that each version has its advantages. But for me, only the Commodore 64 version wins, because it has the most complete and effective set of sound effects. Electric Dreams Aliens is a tough game to love, but it cannot be called devoid of atmosphere or bad value for money, unless you happen to own the super buggy Commodore 64 version. The overall score is based entirely on the assumption that there does exist an official Commodore 64 release out there that doesn't freeze the game at certain points, or have any other fatal flaws in it. Otherwise, I could only suggest to you to either purchase and play any of the other versions. So, for me, the Commodore 16 comes out last, followed by the ZX Spectrum, then the Amstrad CPC, then the MSX, and then finally, the winner, the Commodore 64. But I have to say, I do recommend that you try out every one of these versions because they all have their own specific special things. Particularly the C16 version, which I put last, I thought it was surprisingly well made considering the hardware, but when compared against the other versions, it just doesn't have much of a chance. But as I said, go and try them all out yourselves and find out what the best choice for you is. It's a fantastic game either way, if a bloody hard one. Okay folks, there you go, that was my video covering Aliens the computer game released in the UK. I hope you enjoyed my video, thank you so much for watching it, I really do appreciate that. Now, please leave a comment, do you agree with my ranking? Remember, it's all personal choice here, but let me know what you think, I am interested. And finally, please remember to like my video, share, and better still, subscribe. Until my next video, I'll see you all very soon, bye bye.